Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this, the very first podcast broadcast and recorded at Projekt Renewable in Grimsby. For those of you that don't know what that means, they're the brightly coloured shipping containers that appeared overnight next to the Alexandra Dock, and everybody's wondering what they're for. Hopefully, in the next 40 minutes or so, we'll be able to explain a little bit about what they're for, but also the higher purpose that they bring to the area, to learn a little bit more about the renewables industry that is on our doorstep. And is already, working overtime to deliver opportunities for the area, but also a lifestyle change for many people across the UK and hopefully the world. That's high aspirations. My name is Richard Askam. I'll be your host this morning on this, the podcast with a K. I'll explain that later. And it's in association this morning with our Future Starts Here, an event that the Culture House have been putting on this week to try and bring a cultural and arts edge to the renewables industry. I'm also joined by three guests this morning. Sitting in front of me, looking back at me, thinking, why did I say yes to this, is Alex Wright from Napton Wright. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
Pete Cox from My Energy. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning.
And Chris Gilbert from Phillips 66. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning as well.
I should also explain as well that we have an audience. So this is a bit weird because normally we do these podcasts in isolation. But this morning we have a live studio audience. Good morning, audience.
Morning.
See, I told them to be quiet, and now they're just being quiet, which is nice. So, but thank you. It feels a little bit like breakfast radio. So we'll do our best to keep you cheerful this morning. Gentlemen, I'm going to start really by asking all of you the same question, and I'd be really interested to hear your take on this. What exactly is net zero?
I'll go first, since I work in industry. So net zero is around making sure that the carbon we put in the atmosphere, we take the equivalent amount out. So it balances off against each other. What does that really mean, carbon? So what we do is in society, when we products we use, the energy we use has some emissions of carbon, either in when we drive our car, a non-electric car, and then with the manufacturing of products as well. So all those, you look at how much carbon you make, and then we've got to find ways of removing that from the atmosphere. And it's actually the law, it's enshrined in law in the UK that we will be net zero by 2050.
So that immediately asks me another question then, Chris, and I will ask you both the same question in a second. So net zero is not about eradicating the production of carbon, it's about offsetting the production of carbon by other methods.
Correct. Yeah,
because one of the fears that you always hear is, what are we going to do without oil? What are we going to do without petrol? How will the world completely, continue to turn? And I think people think that net zero means the end of oil and the end of petrol and what have you. Tell me why that's not the case.
You got to think what we do as an industry. I'm talking about my industry, but it's really all around the region as well. So we provide the energy, and we provide the building blocks. We manufacture the building blocks that are used to go in to make materials that are used by society every day. And we've got to find a way to make those less carbon intensive.
I understand that. That's a little bit, but you see my point that we hear these phrases and they're bandied around in the media and in the press, but nobody's actually taken the trouble to explain it to anybody.
Yeah. You think products we make every day, so there are hydrocarbons made from oil. They go into just about everything: pharmaceuticals, household goods. All very prevalent. Even electric car. You think, we talk about the battery of electric car later, how we're involved in that, but all the fabric, the steel, the plastic on the electric wiring, all comes from the products we make from crude oil.
Even the glue that people glue themselves to the road with to protest about oil is made from oil. There we go. Pete, what does net zero mean to you?
Yeah, very well put to begin with. Sharing the same stance as that, it's looking, I guess, two-sided from a personal view, a business view, a whole country's view of how much atmospheric CO2 there is, seeing what we put in or what we output, and reducing that to a net zero. And the terms are always difficult. There's all these terms about net zero and these words that people don't understand. It doesn't really feel tangible. But I guess the ultimate goal is that any harm that we see that somebody or a business is doing to an environment, that they reduce that to zero by either offsetting it somewhere else, or hopefully reducing first and then offsetting what little remains. One thing that's key that you mentioned is people panic about what are we going to do without oil or without the things that we do today. And you're 100% right. It's not a case of let's eradicate everything like tomorrow, because that's not going to happen. It's a case of let's reduce what we're giving out currently through different methods, and let's look at short, medium and long-term solutions that can slowly get us to the goal of where we want to be, which right now is 2050 being net zero.
And you mentioned there about the fear of people thinking that everything's going to be stopped. Not helped when you get news stories and political stories about, well, we're going to stop petrol engines, we're going to stop this, and they're not taking the time to explain what that actually means. Just they're saying what it is, but not what it means. And one of the words that you use there, which a lot of people don't understand, is offsetting. Mm-hmm. So tell me what that means.
So offsetting, I guess by definition, is away from your general actions within a business. So let's say you're using, let's say you're heating a property or a building and creating CO2. Instead, you might choose to divert solar power to heat, thereby reducing your emissions. Offsetting sits separately. It's almost used in a situation where you are producing CO2 currently, atmospheric CO2, that you know you can't reduce to net zero. And offsetting sits at the side where you give back via whether that's monetary or by third-party sort of actions, you give back rather than reducing. So you might put a sum of money into a project or a sum of money into something external that then reduces total emissions, but can be attributed back to you as a company doing some good.
So this isn't necessarily about just stopping doing something will solve the problem. It's a balance of many things, and the marginal gains, if you like, of doing many things differently will all add up to a situation where net zero is achievable.
100%. And the key thing here is when you say about stopping now, it's not stopping now. Like, people are resistant to change. I'm resistant to change. Like, the tea bag's change in the office, I'm upset. But I'm still going to drink the tea. I'm just going to do it slightly differently. And it's about a bit of understanding and people being educated and moving towards it together on multiple fronts.
And this is kind of why Projekt Renewable is here in Grimsby, is to help not only the people in the local area, but also in the wider area to understand the very thing that we're talking about. Because I genuinely believe that the industry has developed beyond the customer. And that customer is sitting at home not knowing really what's going to happen to them or their children or their grandchildren. So listening to you guys talk this morning already in the first 10 minutes, I've learned more than I've learned in the last 20 years in the last 10 minutes. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And Alex, your perspective here is more from a business in the area. You work very closely with Projekt Renewables with Wright, the area's leading marketing agency, if you don't mind me saying. But from a human being, from a consumer, you've just listened to what these two guys have said. Does that now make a little bit more sense to you?
Yeah, it does. So I'm not an entirely objective observer here because of the work that we do in the agency, working with a lot of brands in the sustainable development world. So I can't be entirely objective. However, if I come at this from a human perspective, a father, my kids are they'll be nearly 40 by the time net zero target of 2050 is hit. That feels like a long way off to me. They'll basically be nearly my age, and if I think about net zero, it started off as a good idea. It started off as something which will help us as a planet be better. It helps focus the mind. But like all massive goals, as soon as it then becomes or the plan becomes into execution, then it starts falling apart. So net zero has become, for me as a consumer and as a vaguely educated consumer on this, has become a bit of a crutch that particularly on the political side of things, that people are leaning on. This is feeding into net zero. Don't worry about what it means. And it's great that you guys have explained it, and that's really helpful for people who are listening. But what we need to be doing is making it even more understandable, breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. So it's not just about the 25 different bins that you have to use to put recycling and stuff into that then just gets chucked into the burner down in Lincoln or something like that. This is about actually what can everybody do to impact their kind of square meter around them to help repair the damage that we've done to the planet, particularly in the last 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. So that side of things is as a consumer, that's what I'm looking at. That's what I see as being the most important thing. It's brilliant that there are young people in the room today listening to this, and hopefully it will lodge somewhere in their brain and come out again in the future. But I think that we've got to make it more accessible. 2050 is a long way away. I think the brilliant stuff that's going on at places like Phillips 66 about capturing the carbon, doing stuff with it, turning it into stuff which then can then be used. This is let's look at this from a circular economy perspective. What can we do to have a huge amount of sort of circular economies feeding into one? But I think there's a long way to go. We can't use net zero as a crutch. We've got to do something that is impacting our day-to-day now, not looking at 2050.
Do you think there's an irony that because 2050 is such a long way away, that it's a bit like, we'll worry about that tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that if it's not, and I know that there are lots of businesses, lots of brands, lots of people doing fantastic things, right? Loads of people in the room today who are doing really good stuff. But also I think that it's just sort of like, well, yeah, that's fine. We tick that box. And Pete was talking about offsetting. There's loads of kind of just box ticking that goes on. And, if I then talk about this as a marketing agency, the brands that we work with, our number one goal is to get rid of greenwashing. And actually, if you are doing something in the sustainable development world, you've got to be doing it for the right reason. It's got to have long-term impacts. It can't just be to get more likes, get more pounds in your pocket. This is actually, we're thinking about the people around us here, the impact that you can have across the 7-8 billion people on the planet.
You said something interesting there about your children will be nearly 40 by the time of 2050. We've got somebody in the room today who's 8 years old, so they're going to be 35 by the time that net zero should have been achieved. So really, it's not necessarily us that's going to be the beneficiaries of this. It's going to be the next generation and the generations beyond those. And I think that in many ways that hinders people's approach to what they need to do today, because it doesn't feel like their problem. I know that's ridiculous to say, because obviously it is. A bit like the old saying about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. We've got two industry people in the room with us this morning that are already making these changes. But are we at risk? Sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Chris. Are we at risk of not explaining what's already happening rather than saying, it'll be fine in 2050? Chris?
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make. I think that change has started now. You think what's happening already in this region. So you look, we got some of the world's largest wind farms just off the coast here. And then the amount of wind and renewable power we have now is in really 10 years. Yeah, it's significant. And so the country's already on that journey to net zero. And then I look at some of the things we're doing. We're already running waste feedstocks at the refinery, and that's allowing us, we're running used cooking oil, and that's allowing us to make sustainable aviation fuel. We're selling that to British Airways. That's happening now in this region. We're also trialling another waste for end-of-life tyres. Where do all the tyres go? They go to landfill, right, at the moment. But some companies close by as well, looking to set up where you recycle those tyres and reclaim the metals from it, and it produces a liquid which we're running at the refinery, and that goes in to make the products we make today. So the change is happening now.
Yeah. And that's the really interesting point, and hopefully one of the merits of this project here at Alexandra Dock is to understand that, because I had no idea that was happening. And you talk about used cooking oil, and tyres there. Did you know that was happening, Pete?
Well, you have an idea, but let's face it, as a country, we tend to shut our eyes if it doesn't affect us, if we can't see in front of us what is happening. When these these weather conditions get worse and the storms become more frequent, that's when we start to panic. When the chimneys fall off the houses, we go, oh, it's affecting me now. In terms of, I was just listening there, and it's crucial, I think, that as a country, we sit here and we listen. As homeowners, as anyone in the country, we sit and we listen to people telling us to hit net zero. And that's okay. But as I said, we're going to resist change. And what's key is that people lead, and we look at businesses and the actions we've spoken about there. And we set a precedent for what we do as a big business, and how we do it, and that we're working towards a goal, so that then the homeowner and the average person in the UK sees that what they do is tangible too. Because an argument from a homeowner will be, why should I put solar panels on my house when that business down the road is throwing the tyres out the back and putting them in a skip? But every little helps, and it's about scaling here. We've grown very quickly as a business over the last 5-6 years, and the actions that you put into place might feel small to begin with. You might be one person in one home, or you might be one business with 5 employees. But as we scale, if you put the foundations into play, it's only going to grow and grow and grow. And you're setting goals for other companies, you're setting standards, and that's what we need to do. We need to lead.
And do you think, Alex, with running a business in the area and the measures that what do you do as a company to sort of comply with what Pete's just been talking about, that the evidential marginal gains, that if everybody did, that we would all move so much quicker? That the risk is that everybody points the finger and goes, well, you're just virtue signaling. You're using this for your own commercial benefit. Do you agree with that position? What is it that you're doing as a business? So
there's a lot of virtue signalling going on, and I think that there's probably, everybody's guilty of that to some extent, but I think that the best businesses that are getting it right are the ones that actually open up what they're doing and saying, look, this is us. You can explore our workings here and see exactly how we've got to where we are. So I was lucky enough to hear a talk from Chris a few months ago, and just that the depth of knowledge and the extent to which a big business like Phillips 66 is going to try to make a difference, we've got to have those big guys doing that, right? And that's what's going on in the background. And it's not, I know it's not really the background, but it's as a day-to-day person, I can't do a lot about that. I've just got to leave you to it to make sure that is happening. And then, you think about My Energy and what they're doing and the change that they're trying to bring by encouraging people to use renewables to power their cars and that sort of stuff. And then it comes down to my business, and we're a service business. So what we try to do is our first protocol is to reduce waste. What can we cut down on as a business that we can kind of exist without overproducing? And that comes down to, a lot of our stuff is digital. So coming to reducing the amount of digital file storage that we have in the cloud. It's using energy all the time. So little things like that, not emailing massive attachments. And it sounds a bit boring talking like this, but actually, cutting down little things like that. So if we've got 9 people in our team who are not emailing attachments to clients, and they're then not downloading it, and that's actually, we're being more effective and efficient about the way that we do stuff. And the websites that we build for clients don't use much CO2 because they're fast and they're efficient and they don't have massive images on them. That's just little bits that we're doing to chip away. That's our kind of square meter around us that we're trying to have an impact on. And as we're an agency, we're moving from one office which is hugely inefficient and heats the marketplace outside because it's a Georgian building with thin windows. We're moving somewhere which is more fit for purpose, which has got renewable energy coming into it. It's heated efficiently. And it's actually, it's where we want to be aligning to our brand. But actually, we can sort of say, well, look, if someone asked us, we can say, here's how we heat the building. This is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to do our very best to reduce our footprint, to try to minimize waste. And then we can start improving what we've done and putting stuff back in.
You're listening to the podcast with a K here at Projekt Renewables this morning in association with Our Future Starts Here. And we're talking all things renewable. And so far, gentlemen, we've talked very much from a business perspective and how businesses can do their bit. What about you as individuals? What about you as human beings? Brothers, fathers, sons. What are you doing in your own lives that is helping not only your own world to be more efficient and help towards that target of net zero, but also demonstrating to the wider public? Because I think it's the public that we need to inform here. Businesses are usually pretty good when you show them a way of saving money, they usually jump straight away. But I think in the public sphere, that's very different. And we use a lot of words and a lot of phrases that people don't understand, like decarbonisation and carbon capture. You mentioned greenwashing. These are all, in many ways, media words, industry buzzwords. How can you bring that down to a human level so that not only me, but also the people in this room can go, oh, I see what you mean? Pete, where would you start?
So I've been looking at small changes. And the reason I've looked at small changes is I like to break things down. If you give me a big target and go, right, Pete, you've got to do this by this day, it can look a bit overwhelming. And we talk about these buzzwords, net zero. It sounds overwhelming, but if you can break it down, it helps you to manage the change. So one thing that I've been looking at closely is companies that have attained B Corp. So B Corp is a certification around many things, but it covers how green a company is. They review their supply chains from start to finish. I've turned this into business again, haven't I?
You have. I'll stop you in a second, but keep going.
But the products that hold a B Corp mark, have looked at their environmental impact. So by buying a product that is B Corp, I can make a small change. Sometimes it does cost me a little bit more money, but that's almost a sacrifice for me to have the impact. There's basics of recycling that go back a long way. That's the age-old one that everyone gets told, just recycle. And the big one for me now is looking at solar panels. So the cost of energy is going up. Solar panels on my roof, using technology without the plug that you can get from My Energy, can heat my home. It can charge my electric vehicle, and it can take some of the damage that I can cause away.
So you as a consumer then are looking at the companies that supply you with the things that you need as that consumer to see who's the most energy efficient, ethically sound. Is that a view that you take into your world every day, that you look for the best, not necessarily the cheapest, because and that's a different conversation altogether, but the best way that you as an individual can help? Yeah,
absolutely. Even down to my energy provider. If an energy provider says they're using 100% renewable energy, I'm going to be more attracted to go with that energy provider.
I like the way you said My Energy Provider. He's done it again. Chris, see if you can leave a Phillips 66 into the next answer. What are you doing as a human being for your little bit?
Yeah, so you make personal choices. Your energy provider is one. Food miles in the supermarket, recycling. Those are all things you can do. But I'll just go back a little bit to industry. I think we should be proud of what we do here as industry-wide and as a region. And we should be ambassadors for that. We should be out there educating the public about what we do. We serve a purpose here to provide the rest of the country with the energy and the goods and services that they need. That's something we should be proud about and should educate, and we should encourage people to come into the industry. We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
So I've said a few times, Alex, and you've probably heard me say this, that I think that there's two key problems to how we get to net zero, which is awareness and adoption. And you don't get adoption without awareness. So if we start at that end of the spectrum, and you're in the world of marketing, how do we, from a business perspective, how do we, I don't want to use the word educate because it sounds patronizing, but inform, make aware our customers, our friends, our family, the elements that we all know. And it's lovely that we're well informed about this, but if they're not, then we're not going to get anywhere. If there's only a few of us doing the marginal gains, they're not actually marginal gains at all. Mm-hmm. How would you start from an awareness perspective, listening and talking about what we're talking this morning, to get that point across? Where are the easy wins?
It's generally about becoming an authority on a subject. So the chap sitting next to me, they are both authorities in their respective fields and advocates for everything that they're doing. And that's not just in their business, but the impact that it has across the wider area. So where's the supply chain? Who's feeding into the businesses that are here next to me today? And what are they doing to make a difference? So a lot of the work that needs to happen is about demonstrating that you're doing the right thing, demonstrating that you are doing things in the right way, and that you're having an impact. So the impact that you have as a business, if it's positive, then you need to shout about it. If it's negative, then you need to say, right, it's negative here. this is what we're doing to try to correct it. So this is about sustainable development of brands, of businesses, of what we're doing. Sustainability, I think, is the wrong word to use. And actually, as soon as you start throwing sustainability around, it doesn't really mean anything, because it's just get into some kind of endless loop of, well, what we're doing to sustain. Well, actually, when you put development, sustainable development, this is about the world is moving forwards. You don't want to retract. We've got to keep moving forwards. And the work that the clever people are doing is helping us move forwards. And the small businesses need to learn from that and go, well, actually, innovation that comes from small businesses adds up. That lots of little approach adds up to feed into what the big guys are doing there. And actually, there's a separate panel a few years ago about cybersecurity, where Simon Herring, who set up part of setting up Piper's Crisps, said that the next generation always finds a way to solve a problem. And that doesn't mean that we can just rest on our laurels thinking that the people younger than us will come and fix stuff. We've got to enable them to do that. But as brands, you've got to demonstrate that you want those young people to come through and try and fix the problems, that you're going to be there for them, you're going to support them. And Pete was talking about B Corp brands buying from those kind of organizations because they're doing the right thing. So as a brand, demonstrate that you're doing the right thing. Your right thing might be slightly different from A and others, your competitors or somebody else's. That's how you can set yourselves apart. As a marketing agency, people will buy into us, into me, into the way that we approach things. There are thousands of marketing agencies out there. We're focusing on one particular niche. We are one particular group of people. If you like us, if you like what we're doing, then you buy into it. And the same applies for all other businesses, all other brands. It really isn't desperately difficult. And you see what's happening at My Energy. Jordan's out there. She is that figurehead, and people buy into that. And she scoops everybody up and drives them forwards. And she's really, really educated on what she's talking about. She is that authority, and people will disagree, and that's fine because opinions are great, and that keeps the world going round. But she is laser focused on what she's doing. She's driving the brand on. If you buy into that, then people, you can join her band and carry on with it. And as a consumer, I have a Zappi at home, and because I've got an electric car, and I bought into that because I thought, do you know what, these guys, they're local to where we are, but actually they're global as a business. They're trying to make a difference. They are making a difference. And if a brand can communicate that and say, hey, look, we actually need to use some form of plastic in the housing for our chargers, but actually the way that we've gone about sourcing that is from a sustainable development perspective. And when the products meet their end of life, then this is what we're providing to do so that the consumers can recycle them or reuse them, repurpose. And that every brand buys into that, then we're getting somewhere, aren't we?
So we're joined now, perfect moment to be joined by Charlotte Bowen, who's director of the Culture House and also delivering the Our Future Starts Here programme this week. Charlotte, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for bringing breakfast.
You're welcome.
You've saved my life and everybody else's, so we appreciate that. Charlotte, it felt like a good juncture to bring you into the conversation here as we're talking about raising awareness, really, and in order to lead that to adoption of new behaviours. And one of the areas that I know you're working very hard on is through the cultural and arts work that you do already, but linking that as we are doing this week to Projekt Renewable and really the work that it's trying to do. Tell us a little bit more about what's been going on this week. We won't talk about Storm, but and give us a bit of a clue as to what the Culture House really are leading on.
Thank you. So the Culture House focus on engaging people in arts and culture. And that's in a real wider sense in terms of those cultural experiences being available in places that historically have been lacking. We've delivered a number of programmes, but this current programme, Our Future Starts Here, is about drawing attention to sustainable futures and also into more kind of caring, holistic communities and societies that we might all want to live in the future. Personally, I believe that the last couple of decades have been quite personally indulgent, based on consumerism, and then we're sort of paying the price for that now, coupled with the impact of the Industrial Revolution over time. So we're all aware now of that impact, and we're all aware of things that need to be done about it. I think what's tricky is that it's such a big subject, as has been explained this morning, and it's the public understanding what those concepts are, what do we do about it. It can all seem very overwhelming. So our Future Starts Here is a creative and cultural programme that aims to, on some levels, put the fun back into the whole subject, but also to connect people and be a mechanism to educate. So I think that's where arts and culture can really help this situation of communication from industry that's normally quite serious and dry, or it appears to be from the public's perspective. And how do we communicate that to the masses who understand now that changes need to be made, and it's quite an overwhelming subject. So our programmes include visiting artists and performances, workshops that all focus on that kind of greener future, but in a wider sense as well, looking at that kind of culture that we might all benefit from more than we have done in the past.
It's really interesting, and just to go back one step, and I said this about half an hour ago, I'll explain why project is spelled with a K. The reason project is spelled with a K is because that's the way that the Scandinavian spelling of the word. And what you're describing actually is a learn by play method that the Scandinavians have used for ever. And one of the many reasons that they are miles ahead of anybody in the world in their understanding of the need to change is because of the way that they deliver that message. We're quite backward, I think, in this country in the way that we deliver methods, because we just say, do this, and we don't actually stop to explain why, and we just expect them to do it, and you either pass or fail, which is ridiculous. So given the cultural programme that you're, sorry, I'm getting on a soapbox here, apologies. Given the cultural programme that you're delivering, do you see this learn through play as the starting point, the building blocks of how we encourage our 8-year-old guest this morning to understand all about the words that we're talking about as if they're everyday parlance? And we use them because it makes us sound intelligent, but actually we don't actually know what half of them mean. If we started again and you developed a program, as you are doing, that you could see what that means, 9 times out of 10 you're going to learn more, right?
Exactly. It makes it a lot more accessible to the general public, to children who can be filled with fear, have green anxiety. So it's kind of taking that fear out of it, making it more accessible, friendly, just part of normal life, colourful, interesting. And I think that's the gift that artists and creatives can bring to the situation, is interpreting this kind of high-end information and the bigger picture that's often quite scary, interpreting that into something wonderfully creative, accessible. And it's storytelling, it's telling that story. Not just of those bigger themes, but also with the town and where it's heading. And again, I know that's a point of Projekt Renewable's presence here. It's telling that story of the role Grimsby's playing. So it all filters down, and it's about local pride and people understanding what's going on in their own town and feeling good about that. So there's a lot to make you feel bad at the moment. So it's kind of, let's actually celebrate what's going on, celebrate the innovation. Let's have a good time as well. We don't need to have a bad time with all these sort of heavy subjects. So I think marrying this kind of the direction we need to go in with a cultural message and a cultural experience can work really well. And actually, I think government actually rely on these kind of initiatives to educate the public because it's accessible and it's fun. And, you know, there's obviously serious messages there. And I think it's a mission. It's going to take 10, 15 years, isn't it, for a real sort of impact to kick in and for people to understand what needs to be done, what they can do. It's
underestimated, Chris, isn't it, the value of an entertaining way of delivering information. You know, it's the reason why we can all remember lyrics from you know, the 80s. There's no need to remember lyrics from the 80s, but because they were entertaining, we remember them. So there's a case here, I think, from a business perspective and from a renewable industry perspective to actually make the messaging slightly different. Yeah, yes, we're talking business to business and doing that reasonably successfully, I think, because there's a bottom line advantage to those behaviours. But to our 8-year-old guest this morning, that's not really that interesting. He's not that bothered about a P&L. How are we going to make the information that you need to tell in order to change the behaviour to deliver net zero more entertaining so that people remember it. And I don't mean dressing up as a clown, Chris, although you're more than, I'm really pleased you did this morning.
Lost my words, but I think that's something we recognise as a company, as an industry. We need to educate the public, and we've done some of that working with Grimsby College now to do some educational videos to attract kids. And there is to educate people, as you're saying, about what net zero actually means and the journey we're on. But also, we need to attract the next generation to the industry. We're talking about investing hundreds, billions of pounds in this region, and that's a good thing. Yeah, that's talking about inward investment, jobs. We're an economically disadvantaged area here. We're going to create lots of jobs. And we need to attract those people to the industry for well-paid jobs. And we talk about green jobs, yeah, and you can class them as green jobs, but we're talking about jobs that already exist today. Engineers, scientists, yes, but who are the scaffolders? Who are the welders? Who are the electrical and instrument technicians that we all need, to go on this journey? Yeah.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned education there, because I think we're again a little bit stuck in that education can only be delivered in an educational setting. And we're joined this morning by some people from the education industry, so it'll be interesting to hear their opinion when I finally shut up later on. Pete, when you look at what you're trying to do as My Energy in terms of taking that message out, do you see schools and the route to those children in an education setting as a limiting factor, or do you see that as the only way that we can get that message through?
It's certainly a help. I think for us as a business, what we've tried to do is make electrification, about decarbonisation, fun. We've tried to make it approachable. We've got a mascot. I think I can call him a mascot. I think it's a he. Sparky. It's an alien.
Gender non-specific.
Yes. Yeah. So Sparky is, I guess, our mascot as a business. Now, Sparky is an alien that's come from space and come to Earth and seen what we're doing to the planet and is going, what are you doing? Like, you're getting it all wrong. And it's a great education piece. So Sparky has been out to visit schools to read a book that's been written by Jordan Brompton on the topic, and to educate with an element of fun. And we've missed a big part as a country, and we've mentioned it here. Arts and culture and education, it combined is so powerful. We set these targets for net zero and their numbers, and we tell businesses and people to have actions to change a number. But what's far less tangible is education. It's very easy to go and plant a tree, or to pay someone to go and plant a tree for you. What is far more difficult is to commit to your time, your own learning, and going out and educating and making the topic fun. So we as a business want to go out, we want to educate people, but as a wider audience here, we should make it fun. Charlotte's exactly right. It shouldn't be a boring topic. Let's make it fun. Let's make people remember. When you're at work during the day or you're at school, you're thinking about your hobby that comes after. You want to go home and play football. You want to go home and go to the theatre. And then you think, okay, well, if we can incorporate it into people's lifestyles so that they're always thinking about it and their subconscious is telling them to look at decarbonisation, we're going to put ourselves in a far more powerful position.
And Alex, you've got young children. How often do they come home from school saying, we've had the best day today doing maths?
You'd be surprised, actually. Not really. So there's a few things here that if we can just pick up on that and answer your questions at the same time. So where we live between Grimsby and Scunthorpe. And so sometimes taking my children to gymnastics or some kind of sporting events, and they'll go past the steelworks and they'll go, oh, look at all that muck being pumped out of there. And I say, well, actually, it's you've got to go deeper than that. You've got to see beyond it. What are they doing actually to counteract that? But they then come back and say, well, yeah, but the muck's still coming out. I'm like, well, I think I need someone else more educated than me to talk to you about it. But they do get passionate about. They can get passionate about maths if it's presented in an interesting way. If they're enabled to free their minds and to solve problems. And that's what young people love doing. They love solving problems. And if they can do it in a creative way, then it's even more exciting for them. And so I think, the three of you here have been talking about things that I love to think about. So the idea of bringing in, there's loads and loads of jobs that need to come into this area of various different skills. People are already here, people who need to come in. And that then means that we need to have more stuff to do here. And what Charlotte and the Culture House putting on is fantastic to see. We need more of that. We need to get more people interested, excited in stuff that isn't a screen. It can involve a screen, but it isn't a screen. And it's not just, I'll get outside and play football. It's what I did when I was young. No, let's get people into learn about the way that they can use their brains that are not limited in the way that adults' brains are by experience and sort of negativity around to unpick stuff. So the other day we went in to do some career stuff at Case Yarborough School, year 10s who are 14, 15, and we gave them Projekt Renewable as an idea. Like, how would you reach out to people of your age to promote Projekt Renewable? Talk to them about it, explain the purpose of it, and the wider kind of, about the employment and education things. And we said, right, what would you do? And some of the ideas that they came back with were just brilliant. They had people jumping from planes and they had all sorts of stuff. Recreating murder scenes in the centre of town. I'm not sure that's one that we're going to go with. But and I said, well, what's the purpose of that? Well, actually, it's to make people stop and look, to make people take their eyes off what they're doing, to sort of divert their attention. And that's what, the sort of projects and ideas and campaigns like our Future Starts Here is doing, is to take people away from the kind of the run of the mill and actually put them into a situation where they can come up with new stuff. And you get people doing that again in lots of different places. It's happening here, right here in Alexandra Dock. Can it happen in Scunthorpe, Market Raisin, Gainsborough, Doncaster, and surrounding the area? So we're getting this kind of hub and spoke effect of creativity that's coming into it. And people are, I was in Grimsby the other day doing this. Yeah, I saw it in Scunthorpe, people talking to each other, sharing it. Let's use the digital channels to get people talking about it. And things like, Project here, this is just the beginning for it, isn't it? And I don't need to tell you about that, Rich, but this is just the beginning. How can we get everything coming out of this region? We hear lots of negative stuff about, it's the heaviest polluter of carbon is the atmosphere. Brilliant, but it's also arguably the place where most is being done to counteract that, to bring us back to that kind of net zero idea. And it's almost like we, as a region, we need to create our own brand for net zero about what the Humber is doing and the positive impacts. And that comes through creativity for young people, creativity through not so young people, innovation, pulling stuff apart. It's so genuinely exciting to be here in this region, I think, at this point in time. And yes, there are other parts of the country that are doing it, up in Teesside, the Northwest. There's loads of stuff going on, but this is where we are. This is what we're talking about. This is our square meter, let's say. Let's make it the best that it can be, because it's about that kind of being on the front foot, having your eyes open, positivity. And I think conversations I've had with you, Rich, in the past about various different things is about accepting and forgetting the naysayers. Let them do that. That's fine. Let's be positive and move on.
Maybe we should spell creativity with a K, just to keep on brand.
There we go.
Sorry, that's the way my mind works. Charlotte, I'm going to leave the last word to you, if I may, this morning. And obviously we're here this week celebrating everything that you're doing with our Future Starts Here. But can you see from this morning's conversation how readily recognised the need for what you're doing is from the very industry that needs the very 8-year-olds to understand it? Can you see that link already this morning?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know that commitment is there. I think it's just in the translation that's the important element of where the arts and culture can come in. And I think there's a lot of fantastic artists and artwork out there that's tackling these subjects. There's a lot of artists who are quite advanced in their work, making sustainable work, and describing how they've done that. There's still a lot of education to be done in the cultural sector. Everybody's getting to grips with it. And at the end of the day, we're all on a journey, aren't we, together? And I think that's starting to happen now. It's a collective effort. And as I said, the art and culture side is a really important part of that. But I think it's recognised that it's a collective effort, and working together is going to get us there.
You've been listening this morning to the podcast with a K from Projekt Renewable here in Grimsby. Thank you very much to my guests, Chris Gilbert from Phillips 66, Charlotte Bowen from the Culture House, Pete Cox from My Energy, and Alex Wright from Napton Wright. My name's Richard Askam. Please tune in for another episode of the podcast coming your way soon. It's been produced and engineered by Finn Gray. Thank you very much for listening.